I always thought I had everything under control. My career as a psychiatrist was taking off. My daughter Melanie was my greatest joy. And Dixon, my husband, was that typical Prince Charming that everyone wants. Honest, dedicated. Almost too perfect. But over time, the shine was lost. We became almost strangers, sharing a house, but without sharing much more than that. The conversations became rare. The touch disappeared and the emptiness remained. It was in this space that something unexpected and dangerous found its way. It all started on a day that seemed like any other, until he entered. John, tall, with a presence that was impossible to ignore. That kind of man you feel before you even see him. He had a penetrating gaze, as if he could read every secret you tried to hide. When he sat down and said, without even blinking, "I have an addiction, ... to sex," my entire body reacted. Not out of fear, but out of a curiosity that was as wrong as it was irresistible. My hands felt cold, but my heart felt like it was racing. It wasn't the first time I'd heard intense confessions in the office, but John, ... John was different. Every word felt like a string pulling something inside me that I didn't know existed. As he spoke, it was impossible to look away. The way he described his experiences, his compulsions, was both disturbing and exciting. It was almost an invitation to enter his mind, but it felt like much more than that. And in that session, I realized something scary. He saw me, not as a professional, but as a woman. And damn, I felt alive. John had a way of turning even the simplest thing into something fraught with tension. When he said, "I can't control myself," it's like something stronger took over me. My skin crawled. Not because of what he said, but because of the way he said it. There was something in his eyes, a spark, a challenge. He was testing limits, his, mine. And the craziest, I wanted to see how far this could go. At that moment, I was asking questions automatically. But my head was elsewhere. Every detail he shared seemed purposefully provocative, as if he knew exactly what affected it. He said that it all started after some disappointments in love, but honestly, it seemed like every word was rehearsed to capture me. He wanted my attention. And even more dangerously, he was succeeding. I maintained my professional demeanor, or at least I tried to, but inside, I was seething. Something about John had the power to cross barriers, even those I swore were insurmountable. And as he spoke, a question echoed in my mind. How far can this go? And perhaps most importantly, do I really want to find out? After that first appointment, John just wouldn't get out of my head. I lied to myself saying it was just professional curiosity. But the truth is that he provoked me in a way that I didn't know how to deal with. It was like an irresistible magnet, an invisible force that pulled me. His every word, every damn look, everything was charged with an energy that moved me deep, down where no one else had touched. At home, things started to go wrong. Dixon was still there, the same kind, predictable man he had always been. But me, I was somewhere else, living in another reality. On the nights he tried to get closer, my mind was already gone. I was far away, imagining John, thinking about what he would say in the next session, what he would do. It was like living two lives, that of the devoted wife and that of the woman who couldn't stop wanting another man at the office. Things got even more intense. I wrote down details about our meetings, but every word on the paper was just an excuse to remember him. John had that look, a look that seemed to peel off your layers one by one without mercy. He looked as if he knew exactly what was happening inside me. And the worst, he knew. He knew he was teasing me. He knew he was making me feel things I should never feel. Mornings took on a new meaning. Suddenly, what I wore mattered. I've spent minutes, sometimes hours, choosing the right outfit. Something that stood out, but without being obvious. More intense perfumes, accessories that caught attention, lipsticks that he might notice. It was ridiculous, but it seemed like every detail was for him. Would he notice? This question haunted me every time I looked in the mirror. It was like walking on the edge of an abyss, knowing that any wrong move would cause me to fall. I knew I was playing with fire. My career, my family, everything I had built, all of it was at risk. But damn, temptation was an electric current, coursing through my body, was hot, addictive, impossible to ignore. And the more I tried to escape it, the more I seemed to be pulled back. John was like an addiction I didn't want to kick. Every appointment with him became a game. The words were chosen carefully, but they carried ulterior motives. It was as if we were dancing on an invisible line. He played, and I responded. His fixed gaze, the way he leaned his body towards me, that smile that said more than any words. He knew what he was doing to me. And the craziest, I liked that. I liked how he touched everything in me. It was wrong. It was dangerous. But what could I do? One particular afternoon, he arrived late. I almost canceled the session, irritated. But as soon as John entered the room, the atmosphere changed. The air became denser, as if it carried something invisible and dangerous. He sat up, locked eyes with me, and with disconcerting calm, said, "I think I'm getting addicted to you." My heart stopped. My defenses, which I tried so hard to maintain, collapsed right there. I knew what I had to do, put an end to that madness, but instead I let the silence wash over us, letting the tension become almost palpable. The sessions started to get intense. He opened up in a way that made me feel special, needed, almost wanted. And even though I knew how risky it was, I started to open up too. Discreetly, of course. Comment here, an expression there, enough for him to realize that the attraction was reciprocal. The worst, he knew how to play. Every smile of his, every word spoken at the exact moment made. My heart beat wildly, and I hated how much I liked it. Until it happened. One day during a session, he touched me. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but the effect was devastating. My body reacted before my mind even processed. A wave of heat ran through my skin, and in that instant, it became clear. There was no turning back. The line between the professional and the personal had been erased, and now I was throwing myself headlong into something that could destroy everything I had built. I wondered if he felt the same, if he was also fighting this force that seemed to pull us closer and closer. But the answer was in his eyes. That intense look, full of desire, told me that he knew exactly what he was doing, and that he liked the power he had over me. We were playing with fire, and every day the flame grew louder. It was only a matter of time before we got burned. And Dixon, my marriage has always felt safe. He was the type of man who made a point of being present, even with the weight of his work as a prosecutor. But now something was different. I noticed this in the small details. In the way he watched me, like he was trying to put pieces of a puzzle together. And me, I was becoming an expert at hiding secrets, keeping up appearances as if nothing had changed. Nights at home were an uncomfortable game. He would ask about my day, and I would respond emotionlessly, looking away before he could realize what was going on in my mind. Each question felt like a test, an attempt to disarm me. Did he know? Did he suspect that while we were in the same room, my mind was far away, enveloped by another man and the chaos he brought into my life? There was a moment that stuck with me like an open wound. Dixon, perhaps sensing the distance between us, asked me to watch a movie together. Something simple, almost innocent, but something we hadn't done in months. During the session, he held my hand. It was a small gesture, but the impact was devastating. The guilt came like a crushing wave. It was as if in that touch, he could feel the abyss that had formed between us. And yet, instead of trying to reconnect with him, I sank deeper into my thoughts about John. And it wasn't just Dixon. Even Melanie, our daughter, seemed to notice. Children have this instinct, you know? She looked at me with those curious eyes and asked, "Mommy, are you sad or are you tired?" I made excuses. I smiled mechanically, but inside I was torn apart. It was like I was falling apart, losing pieces of myself. Every lie I told pushed me further away from the people I loved most, and yet I couldn't stop. Dixon began to observe more, not directly, but in detail. He commented, almost casually, that I seemed distracted lately. I didn't insist, but the subtext was there, loaded. Did he know? Was he waiting to pick up the pieces and confront me? I tried to smile, tried to act like everything was normal, but the weight of the lies was starting to crush me. I became a worse and worse actress, unable to sustain my own charade. And then there were the moments that killed me inside, when he would surprise me by hugging me, complimenting me, or simply doing something kind. The guilt in these moments was almost unbearable, like a sharp knife spinning in my chest. But at the same time, the desire for John continued to burn. It was a growing flame, an obsession that consumed me. I knew I was being pushed to the limit, and that at some point, this war inside me would come to an end. And it probably wouldn't be pretty. Dixon was no fool. He was intelligent, perceptive. I knew he would notice, sooner or later. And the question that haunted me, that kept me up at night, was, when he finds out, what will be left of us? And it was then that everything came to a critical point. After weeks of mounting tension, John made an after-hours appointment. It was late. The office was empty. And deep down, I knew there was absolutely no professional justification for that session. It was something much more than that. And yet, I accepted, like someone who sees disaster approaching but cannot turn away. When he entered the room, something was different. John wasn't the same man who used to share his stories with that dangerous, provocative charm. This time, he seemed more serious, more decided. He sat silently, his eyes fixed on mine, as if he was waiting for me to make the next move. It was seconds that felt like hours until he finally broke the silence. I need to know. Do you feel the same? My heart raced. Each beat was like a drum echoing throughout my entire body. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to surrender. 2. What I had been repressing for so long, but along with desire came fear. Scared of what that meant, afraid of what I would lose. It was as if my mind was an uncontrollable storm of thoughts, while my body already knew exactly what it wanted. I tried to divert, change the direction of the conversation, but he wouldn't let me. John was never the type to accept running away. He leaned forward, his fingers brushing mine almost imperceptibly. But in that touch, there was everything we couldn't say. "Kimberly," he murmured, his voice low, husky, thick with intent. You know, this is more than just professional. The way he said my name, no one had ever pronounced it like that. It seemed like he shaped it with desire, transforming each syllable into an invitation impossible to refuse. And I didn't refuse. I couldn't resist anymore. It was as if all the barriers I had put up had been torn down at once. When our lips finally met, the rest of the world disappeared. There was no office, no ethics, no guilt. There were just the two of us, consumed by something that was growing and feeding on every look, every unspoken word. His every touch was like fire on my skin, igniting parts of me I didn't even know existed. But deep down, I knew that moment would not come without consequences. Every second I gave myself to him was a step into the unknown, a reminder that something was about to fall apart. The line had already been crossed, and now there was no turning back. It was no longer a question of how it had started, but of how far it could go, and whether I would be able to handle what came next. As I walked home that night, the taste of John still on my lips, a single question echoed in my mind. What did I do? I had opened a door that I didn't know how to close. Maybe it was too late. Maybe I didn't even want to close it. After that night, everything changed, torn between two worlds. One was stable, predictable, my impeccable career, my perfect family, the facade of a life that seemed as solid as it was fragile. The other, it was a forbidden, uncontrolled world that John had opened up to me. A world where desire consumed any trace of reason. And this contrast was killing me. When I was with Dixon or Melanie, the guilt was suffocating, a constant weight that I couldn't lift. But when I thought about John, or worse, when I was with him, the desire was overwhelming, impossible to ignore. I was two people living, two lives, and every day that passed, I felt like I was closer to losing control of both. The truth, I knew this couldn't last forever. Life has a cruel way of ripping our secrets out, of exposing us at the moment we are most vulnerable. And I felt almost like a premonition that the bomb was about to explode. Was it worth it? Did that fire, intense and irresistible, but fleeting, justify the risk of losing everything I had? I tried to convince myself that I still had control, but the truth was clear. I had lost him a long time ago. Then, one afternoon while I was in the office reviewing cases and trying to ignore the chaos inside me, my phone rang. It was Dixon. His voice seemed calm, but there was something about the tone that made me freeze. He just said, "We need to talk." 3 words that hit like a punch in the gut. I didn't ask why. I knew he knew. And the moment I feared more than any other had finally arrived. When I got home, the environment was heavy, suffocating. Dixon sat at the table, motionless, but with a look that said it all. There was no anger in his eyes, which somehow made everything even worse. The silence was deafening, and the tension in the air felt overwhelming. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you still love me?" In that instant, everything around me stopped. It wasn't just about me or John. It was about us, about everything. Dixon and I had built every piece of our history, every promise I was about to destroy. And as much as my mind wanted to find a way out, my heart knew there was no turning back. I was on the edge of an abyss, and everything depended on the next step. The truth is that I still don't have all the answers. Life does not give us clean outcomes. It does not deliver redemption on a platter. But what I learned is that choices have a price. Every decision we make, every moment we follow desire instead of reason, leaves scars. And running away from them is not an option now. It's up to me to face what comes next. The consequences, the losses, everything. 'Cause at the end of the day, this is what defines us. The choices we make, the lines we cross, and the marks we carry. And looking forward, the only thing I know for sure is that nothing, absolutely nothing, will be the same as before.